Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing pattern testing, what it is, why we do it, and we're going to focus on how to be a tester and how to be a great tester. Okay, so first, what is pattern testing? Essentially, pattern testing is just the designer has a rough draft of the pattern and they get a group of people together to test out that pattern. Why is pattern testing important? It's important to make sure that there aren't any errors, obviously, but I think it's extra important for crochet wearables, so garments and accessories that you're going to put on your body, because we want to make sure that those pieces are going to fit people properly. Especially when we're talking about garments, we want to make sure that the piece fits all bodies in a similar way. How does pattern testing work? Basically, how it works is the designer sends the pattern to testers and testers make from that, bringing up any issues as they come along them. Issues that might come up include grammar issues, stitch count issues, anything regarding clarity of steps as well too. And a couple of the things that I find most beneficial from pattern testing is finding out the final yardage or yarn usage for your design and seeing how your design fits people with different bodies. So today we're going to focus on being a tester, how to be a tester, and how to be a great tester. I'll be answering a number of your questions from Instagram. Some of them I'll cover just as I'm chatting, and some of them I'll answer specifically at the end. So let's start from the start. How to become a pattern tester. The only things that you really need to be a pattern tester are the ability to crochet and to apply for the pattern test. As a designer, I like to have testers with a variety of skill sets in my testing groups because it helps me to realize where those kind of sticking points are in the pattern. So if you're an inexperienced tester or a newer crocheter, that does not mean that you can't be a pattern tester. In fact, you'll be a great pattern tester because you're more likely to kind of find those areas that are a little bit more challenging and express that you need help in those areas. The primary responsibility of a tester in the testing phase is to communicate. You should always be communicating with the designer anytime any type of question comes up in your mind. If there might be a stitch count issue, if there might be a row count issue, if the thing doesn't look like it's going to fit properly, you need to communicate that right away. Obviously, another big responsibility is making sure that you stay on track to finish by the deadline. Then another responsibility is to submit notes and photos of the final piece to the designer. You want your notes to be as detailed as possible. Anything that you have any question about, include it. Anything that you're concerned about, include it. It's always better to err on the side of too much information than not enough information, and problems still persist in the final pattern. Okay, now I'm going to answer your questions specifically. I got a couple questions about how to become a tester, how to break into testing, because it seems like a lot of designers just use the same testers over and over. I am definitely one of those designers who likes to use the same testers over and over because I know them. I know they're reliable and they're going to submit those notes and photos on time. But I do like to bring on new testers every once in a while because the same set of testers get used to my patterns and might miss some of the mistakes. Or some of those areas that are challenging, they might just work through it because they know how my garments kind of work. The best thing that you can do to become a tester is to just keep applying. To break into testing, it might be easier to find more of an up-and-coming designer who doesn't have a big base of pattern testers and get in with them and go with them as they grow. Then you're building up your resume of testing as well too, and then can apply to other designers as well. I know that there are certain hashtags on Instagram like hashtag pattern tester call or hashtag pattern tester or hashtag pattern testers wanted, I think. Those are areas where designers will post tester calls. There are also a number of Facebook groups and Ravelry forums dedicated to pattern testing, so go and look for those. I personally very rarely post testing calls anymore. I have an email list of testers that I go to when I have a pattern that needs testing. I only go public with pattern tests for specific sizes that I didn't get coverage for in my regular pattern testing email list. Most designers who are Instagram based, like myself, love to see a public Instagram account. And hopefully your account showcases some of the crocheted things that you've made. It's basically like a mini background check for us to make sure that you can actually crochet the difficulty level that the pattern requires and to see how you are at taking photos of finished objects. That leads me to the next question I got. Is it possible to test without a public Instagram account? Yes, it is. Some designers do mandate it. I'm one who does really like to see those public accounts, but I don't think it's necessarily mandatory. I do want to see some photos of your finished objects though, so if you're applying without a public account, I'll want to see that you're able to take photos of finished objects and that you're comfortable with me sharing photos of it. Photos are so essential in pattern testing because I want to be able to showcase my garments on different bodies. But if you have a private account and you're not comfortable with me sharing finished object photos, it does put me in a bit more of a challenging position because I want to be able to show my customers and my followers what the pattern will look like on a variety of people. The next question is, what do I look for when choosing pattern testers? Obviously, we've talked a little bit about photos, but I also look for people with a variety of skill set. I want some testers in my testing group where this will be a challenge for them, and I want some testers in my testing group where this will be a breeze for them. Different testers that are at different levels in their crochet journey are going to find different issues with the pattern, and that's how I'm going to get the best notes possible to make that final pattern the best. That being said, most of my designs are not absolute beginner friendly, so I don't think I'd bring on somebody who's only ever crocheted a dishcloth. I want somebody who knows their way around crochet a little bit. However, if I do an accessory tester call, maybe then I would bring on an absolute beginner. And there's also a lot of other designers out there doing much more simple designs that will bring on an absolute beginner, and that'll help you to build your skill set. With regards to photos specifically, I like to see photos that I can use in a variety of ways. Things that give me that nice 16:9 ratio for reels because I love to do tester montages, but then also photos that are easy to crop square for the Instagram square. I also love to see brightly lit photos that are usually outdoors or at least in natural light. It'll showcase you and your finished object the best. I list kind of the things that I'm looking for in photos in both the application form and in the notes form, so that way testers are able to provide me with photos that I'll hopefully be able to showcase all their hard work. I got a number of questions about the traits of a good tester, the traits of a not so good tester, how to be the best tester. And my number one tip, I already mentioned, is communication. Communicate if you find any issues in the pattern. Communicate if you're falling behind on the deadline. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Even if you think it's not important or you think you might feel stupid for asking the question, ask it. A designer would rather answer the same question 100 times in testing than have to answer that same question 1,000 times from their customers. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised this is my number 2 rule for testing after communicate, but it's to get gauge. Get gauge. And I'm not talking just getting gauge in your swatch. I mean while you're making. Make that swatch, get gauge, keep getting gauge as you make the pattern. If you're not getting gauge, it will affect how the garment fits you and it will affect how much yarn you use to make it. And those are 2 very important pieces in testing for designers. Then the third thing, which was also a separate question as well too, about modifying. Absolutely no modifying in testing unless the designer specifically says that they're okay with it, but I would not ever allow modifications in testing of my designs. Why am I so strict on that? Because I need to know how the piece fits as it's designed and how much yarn it uses as it's designed. This means you need to use the same weight of yarn, you need to follow the number of stitches and the number of rows to a T in that pattern. However, if something is not fitting or not looking right for your size, bring that up to the designer. Don't make it and have it not fit and then everybody's upset. Bring up any fit issues to the designer. Those are modifications that need to be made. because it's likely that the pattern is not going to fit other people with your body type. The next question I got was, do we need to pay for the pattern if testing? The answer is no. A designer should never make you pay for the pattern when you're testing it. The only exception is if you do not finish by the testing deadline, then you should pay for the pattern. Personally, I don't always invoice for the pattern if somebody doesn't complete by the testing deadline, but I do encourage that tester to go and buy the final PDF from my website or Ravelry. And if somebody does not complete a test for me, I remove them from my email testing list. Obviously, there are exceptions to that rule. Life happens. If something comes up in your life that is preventing you from finishing the test, communicate with the designer. Yes, we'll be bummed that you're not able to complete, but obviously your health and wellness and the health and wellness of your family and your home are more important than pattern testing. The only time I really invoice for an incomplete test is when I can tell that it is just a poor time management issue. In addition to getting the pattern for free, the designer should provide you with the final, fully edited PDF, and typically designers will give you a coupon code to download another pattern of theirs for free. It's just a nice thing to do. And that wraps up the video about pattern testing from a pattern tester's perspective. Next week, we're going to talk about pattern testing from a designer's perspective. We'll talk about timelines, we'll talk about compensation, we will talk about all things pattern testing, how to do it from a designer's perspective. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more questions about pattern testing from a pattern tester's perspective, put them in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe and come back next week to hear more about pattern testing.